It is Friday, so let's get to some questions from the listeners.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That is at JOHNYJ_15. And you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners wondering how often we post content on this channel, I bring you episodes Monday through Friday, 30-minute episodes in length. And during the season, we also have the Locked On Royals postcast hosted by Chance Lebo, where he goes to you live for about 15 to 20 minutes after each and every game. Before we dive into your guys' questions, let's tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. And a happy Halloween to everybody out there listening. I'm sure by the time I get this posted, you are either taking your kids out to go trick-or-treating, maybe you're going to a party. So wanted to get this in before everybody settles in for the night. Or if you are staying in, maybe you can get some Royals content while you're sitting on the couch and eating candy instead of a Halloween movie you're watching this episode, which, of course, we love here on the Locked On Royals channel. But let's kick things off here with question number one coming from Connor. Do you think the Royals will prioritize Mike Yastrzemski or possibly target other outfielders such as Cedric Mullins or a trade? A little bit of both would be my answer here. I believe that they will prioritize bringing Mike Yastrzemski back, but not for an everyday role. At this point in his career, he's a platoon bat. The Royals acquired him at the deadline to be a platoon bat, and I could see them having that reunion. We talked about that in one of our episodes earlier this week. They're also going to try to acquire another outfielder to, really lengthen out the lineup. A corner outfield bat is very likely, but they can't turn down, a player just because of where they play. If they can get a legitimate bat that can help out this lineup, they can make it work somehow in some way. But I would say they would probably prioritize a Mike Yastrzemski over a Cedric Mullins, but then their big acquisition of the offseason, I do see it be a trade for a corner outfield bat. This one is coming from Chad. Would you be willing to put Bichette at second and platoon left field again in 2026? Absolutely. I'd be all for going after Bo Bichette. I just see it as unlikely, though. I believe that Bo Bichette is going to want to go be a shortstop somewhere, and somebody's going to pay him to be a shortstop. I'm not sure that, even though he's been open to it with the Blue Jays, it's a little bit different because he's coming off of injury and his team's in the World Series. You're going to be willing to move wherever they put you. Going into free agency, he's good enough where somebody will try to pay him to be their everyday shortstop, and not just for the next couple of years, probably the next 7 to 8 years, because I expect him to get that big-time contract. This one is coming from Joe. What's going to happen with Jonathan India? It will be one of the biggest question marks this offseason, what the Royals choose to do with Jonathan India. He's not making anything that will absolutely tear up your payroll or take a large chunk out of your payroll. He'll be making close to $10 million if the Royals decide to keep him. I could also see them non-tendering him in the offseason because they feel they can get better at that position, or they'd rather go with Michael Massey or Adam Frazier and put that money toward another player, put that money toward bullpen help, a corner outfield bat, more depth for the bench. So I'm still torn on what it's really going to be, what that decision will end up being finalized with. So I would say that with Jonathan India, my gut tells me that he will be back next season, but I don't feel confident in that whatsoever. I know it's maybe not the answer you were hoping for. It kind of goes day by day with me. There's days that I go, Jonathan India is going to be back. He's going to be the opening day second baseman. They'll, have his contract at around $9 to $10 million. And there's days that I also go, I don't see them bringing him back just because the numbers weren't there last year and they don't want to pay that type of money for a potential bounce back going into 2026. This next one's coming from Michael Garcia Devotee. Do you think we have any chance of getting Gleyber Torres? If we got him, I know we would have to get rid of one of India or Massey. Who would we get rid of? If they were to get Gleyber Torres, my guess is that Jonathan India would no longer be on the team. Gleyber Torres, though, is going to want a multi-year deal, and it might be a little bit more expensive than all of us would hope for. I believe he'd be a good bat for this lineup, but are you willing to pay that much for a second baseman? You've heard me say it before. I'll say it again. Second base is a very low-value position, and would you rather give that contract to Gleyber Torres? Maybe he wants anywhere from $15 million to $20 million a year, and that might be overshooting it just a hair. Or would you rather have Adam Frazier come back and hit 270, 275 with a 330, 335 OBP, be a league average bat, and then you put that focus toward an outfield bat, somebody that can really be a game-changing piece for this lineup? And I'm not sure that I see Gleyber Torres being a game-changing piece. He'd be an upgrade, that's for sure, but they need to be smart with their money here, and that would maybe be their biggest acquisition if they got Gleyber Torres, and you'd still have those issues in the outfield. Fair question, though. This one's coming from Kate. Is Will Klein the biggest fumble? I'm just joking, but what a performance in Game 3. Hey, we talked about it too earlier this week. I'm so happy for Will Klein. I know that you just said you were as well. That was such a cool moment for him, and maybe he'll be called upon tonight as the Dodgers are trying to force one more game this season for that ever so amazing Game 7 of the World Series. It doesn't get much better than that. Will Will Klein be called upon? You probably have to wait till extra innings because that's really the only way I could see him getting in the game. But if he doesn't, and their season ends tonight, still a remarkable performance by former Royal Will Klein. Hope he catches on next year in that bullpen and has a really good season. This one is coming from Bryce. Do you see a scenario in which the Royals trade both Bubic and Cameron for maybe 2 impact bats and ride with Bergert as the 4 and battle for number 5 with Kolek and the others? I don't see it, but just something that crossed my mind. I'd say it's very unlikely. It's more likely they would keep both than trade both. I do expect them to trade one of their starting pitchers. I just don't really know who yet. But to trade both of them, incredibly unlikely. They love those guys a lot. It would have to take a jaw-dropping deal for them to be both traded away. It will take a jaw-dropping deal to trade one of them because those are 2 pitchers that are young, controllable years, and are coming off great seasons. I know Bubic had his second half derailed by injury, but I would say that to have both them moved or just one of them moved, the Royals will need a legitimate big-time bat for the middle of the order. Otherwise, they're probably going to be back in that rotation in 2026. This one is coming from Thomas. How will the impending lockout of 2027 affect the way the Royals and other organizations will operate in 2026, if at all? It's a very fair question and one that I expected to get at some point. It's tough to tell before we even have a lot of knowledge on if it's going to happen. Now, there's people that say we are going to get the lockout. And what I can always tell in these situations is, you go back to the owners and the players, they butt heads a lot. The Players Association, and then you've got the owners and Rob Manfred, Major League Baseball. They do not like negotiating with each other. They have never liked doing it. There is a lot of tension on both sides, which is why it's led some people to believe that a lockout is going to happen, because we saw Major League Baseball come close to missing some games early on in the season back in 2022, and that was a whole debacle all off season. And the players, they are never going to agree to a salary cap. At least I don't believe that to be the case. So unless there was some, I guess, giving in on one side, I don't even know if it'd be the owner side or Major League Baseball or the Players Association. The Players Association, they really like to, put their stake in the ground and dig their heels in, and they're not going to back down at all. So as a baseball fan, and I know for a lot of you listening, the goal is that somebody or cooler heads will prevail, or somebody speaks up and they are the voice of reason. But in terms of how it would affect they operate, it's so tough to tell until we know how things would change. We'd have the details laid out in front of us of what a lockout would look like, what change the baseball would happen. The only thing, to play along with this question of if there was a salary cap, well, then you could see smaller market teams maybe be a little bit more aggressive on some of those high-end free agents, because teams like the Dodgers, teams like the Yankees, the Phillies, the Mets, they won't be able to just get whoever they want with no salary cap there. You would have teams have to give up on other players and not be as aggressive in certain off seasons because they're right up on the salary cap. They can't afford it. For the Royals, I would hope that they would know how to negotiate with a lot of contracts and make sure that they are spending, being aggressive, and never putting their eggs all in one basket. Because that's something I would find very fascinating if there was a salary cap in baseball, because you see it across all these other sports of how teams would operate, right? You wouldn't be seeing some of these absurd contracts anymore because teams couldn't afford it. And maybe it even the playing field. I really don't know, but it's something to watch here because these two sides, they're not good at negotiating. There's a lot of ill will on both sides, and it does have me concerned that there could potentially be a lockout when really all this dust settles, if you will. Let's take our first break of the show. When we come back, still plenty of questions to get to next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find us on wherever you listen to your podcast. Want to tell you about the first sponsor today in PrizePicks. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. And if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates. That includes California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play that first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. Next round of questions is going to begin with Eli. Just started my own sports podcast for a school project, primarily doing NFL, MLB, and college football. What would be your biggest tips for podcasting as a solo person and being able to talk about the same subject for as long as you do each segment? Good work on the show per usual. Thanks for the kind words, Eli. And I'd love to check out the podcast whenever you get it up and running, or if that even is the way this school project is working. But to your question, of course, is absolutely preparation has to be a part of it, but pick things that you are really passionate about. I mean, there's definitely been times with my podcast that there are maybe topics that people may want to know about, but I don't know if I could go 10 minutes long in each segment talking about it. I try to find some really passionate points that I could ramble on and on about. Now, it's not easy. There are definitely times that I'm looking up at the little timer I have, and I get up to 7 or 8 minutes, and I'm out of words. I'm out of talking points there, and it can be really difficult. But the preparation, having a sheet in front of you, having multiple bullet points, don't ever overload stuff with a notebook where you could lose your place. Have a couple of bullet points, review it before an episode, and then really try to hammer in a point. And for me, I like to lead in to a lot of segments and maybe fluff it up a little bit. Some people like it, some people don't. But that's one way to do it too. If you have a point, really try to bring the audience in, and then midway through that segment, have your points, have multiple of them at that, and then talk for as long as you can. But that would be maybe my best words of advice is be really prepared before you do your episode and find stuff you're really passionate about. It doesn't always have to be this super unique and crazy off-base thing. If you can talk about it for 10 minutes, then you dive right into it and you just keep going and going, and you hope you can find your point along the way, because I know I've done that more than a time or two. Next one is coming from, looks like Eli again here. With Kurt Suzuki being hired as the manager of the Angels, do you think that after Salvi retires, he will take on a coaching role in the Royals organization? Maybe after he enjoys retirement a little bit. He loves to be around the game. It would probably be a great manager one day. Certainly possible. I mean, we see with catchers all the time, they are the best, managers, or at least the majority of baseball with managers. There's a lot of catchers. There are a lot of catchers out there, former catchers, guys that are far removed from the game, maybe just a couple years removed from the games because they worked with pitchers. They also have the offensive side of things. They're great game callers. And so for Salvador Perez, yeah, he is a baseball man. He feels like a baseball lifer. And if he retired, yeah, I could absolutely see a world in which he immediately becomes a coach. And maybe not a manager. It would take him a little bit of time. But I would hope for him to be a manager one day, and maybe even the manager of the Royals down the road. So that is a very intriguing question, and one that, who knows, maybe this offseason we might talk a little bit more about. Let's go over to YouTube here, and just a reminder to new listeners out there, if you want to be involved in this episode, just reach out to me on Twitter or reach out to me on YouTube, and I'll be sure to get your question answered, as long as you put Mailbag Friday before your comment, so that'll be easy for me to pick it up in the notifications. This one's coming from Matt. What happens if we trade away Cameron or Bubic and Waka and or Lugo don't return to their 2024/2025 form? That's a risk that we have to be willing to take, right? Or would it be better to focus on trading prospects? Trading for an outfield bat just to have our pitching fail would be counterproductive. I would agree with that. Here's where the Royals are at, though, when it comes to acquiring a middle-of-the-order bat. They can't get that big-time bat unless they part ways with a really good player. And for teams that might have that middle-of-the-order bat that fit the needs of the Royals, they might not be okay with just a Blake Mitchell or a Drew Beam or a Ben Kudrna, right? They may say, those kids might become something. They might turn into an all-star. They might be an everyday player, but we know that Noah Cameron or Chris Bubic can be penciled right into our rotation. And so for the Royals, it comes down to how the market is really going. If they can't find anything in free agency, nothing is fitting, and they get to a point where they desperately need that middle-of-the-order bat, you might need to go the extra mile and take the risk, take the leap of faith in trading one of those guys and having the confidence you can replace that production with Ryan Bergert and Stephen Kolek. When it comes to Lugo and Waka, I think it's unlikely they ever return to 2024 form because those were both ridiculously good seasons by their standards. But I believe they can be consistent arms in that rotation. And you want a full season of health from Cole Reagans. You want Ryan Bergert, Stephen Kolek to take the next step, a Chris Bubic or Noah Cameron to take the next step. And then you wouldn't be as worried about that production. But the Royals have 8 to 9 guys who could start in rotations across baseball. You got an abundance of it. What you don't have an abundance of is depth offensively and a corner outfield bat. That's why I would be more willing to make that trade and have the confidence in Brian Sweeney, Zach Bovin, Mitch Stetter to turn one of those guys, whether it be Bergert or Kolek, into a great middle-of-the-rotation guy for this team going into 2026. This one's from Logan. Who is your least favorite Royals player post-2000? And can you give me the most obscure player you can think of that donned a Royals uniform post-2000? Mine is Tony Pena Jr. It kind of comes down to what era you started watching Royals baseball. Though Tony Pena Jr. didn't do much, I don't know if I would call him a random Royal. I mean, most Royals fans can picture him immediately, can picture his jersey and the expectations we all put on Tony Pena Jr. I would say my least favorite Royal post-2000, trying to rack my brain here. One that, well, I feel bad doing this because I believe the guy just retired, but the numbers were just not there. Chris Owings is probably up there just because, man, he hit 114 or something and struck out over 50% of the time. He was barely here. I would feel more comfortable in giving that answer. If it was somebody that was frustrating to watch and just seemed to always have spats with teammates or fans, Jose Guillen is up there as well. But there were some years that Jose Guillen contributed pretty well there. So maybe those would be the two answers I could give you. And then most random Royal. Another fun question here. Let's go with, and it's tough. I would love to sit down and make out a list of this. Maybe that'd be a fun episode segment of going back and forth with somebody and naming the most random Royals. Eddie Romero comes to mind there, was barely in Kansas City. If I was to go even further back than that, oh, man. See, and I don't want to say somebody that actually had a good season. I have some names that are coming to mind, like Felipe Paulino comes to mind, but he had some good seasons as well. Got one. I'll go Kaneko Teixeira. That's a random Royals name that I can think of off the moment. I don't want to keep stalling here. Here's the fun part about that question, though. I want people to comment either their least favorite Royal post-2000 or the most random Royal you can think of post-2000. So love that question, Logan, and look forward to any more that we may get involving bringing up old Royals names or old Royals coaches. Next one here is coming from Armageddon Sports. Hey, Jack, first of all, love your show. Thanks for the kind words. My question is, you mentioned the Royals needing to be competitive in the division, but the Royals in the last 2 years have also not won a series against the Yankees, Red Sox, Phillies, or Dodgers. What do you think the Royals need to do in order to be more successful against those teams? It would probably come down to matching up with them a little bit more offensively. It's one thing to be a team that is built on pitching, which the Royals are, you still have to be able to keep up with those teams offensively. They're never going to be as good offensively as the Dodgers or the Mets or the Phillies with the star power that they have there, but you can try to beat them in a variety of other ways. It's why we saw with the Brewers and the Dodgers, the Brewers have really good pitching. The Dodgers got their pitching hot at the right time, but those two teams did not match up offensively, even though the Brewers, I believe, swept them both times in the regular season. For the Royals, we have to acknowledge, too, that they are only 2 years removed from a 106-loss season. The goal is to be more competitive each and every year, and therefore your floor gets raised a lot where you're expecting 80 to 90 wins every single year. The Royals aren't there just yet, but once they do, you add more talent, you develop more talent, and they will be able to keep up with those teams. But there were still guys on this Royals team last year that have no business being on a team that is competing for October and competing for a division crown. Let's take our final break of the show. When we come back, we will wrap it up with our final set of questions on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Our final sponsor we want to tell you about is also the title sponsor in FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Our final set of questions is going to begin with Brad. Would it be worth checking in on Jordan Beck's trade availability? The Rockies need pitching prospects. They absolutely need pitching prospects. They just need prospects in general. They need to fully commit to this rebuild. It's not going to be popular with the fans. And Jordan Beck is a young player where I could see ownership and the front office saying, we're trying to acquire talent here, and trading away one of our better young players goes against what we're trying to do. Maybe it's one thing to trade away guys that are, taking up a ton of your payroll. They're expensive guys. They're going to be free agents the next season. Jordan Beck is somebody you can call about, would be an interesting piece and somebody that would really make my eyebrows raise if the Royals were to acquire him, because I don't really have him on the radar. But the Royals do have an abundance of pitching prospects and prospects in general that might be enticing for Colorado. What I really want to know about the Rockies, though, is what direction they try to take in getting back to relevancy. Are they going to try to build a pitching staff? Pretty hard to do when you're pitching in the altitude in Coors Field and you just know that you're going to be giving up tons of runs every single game, even if you bring in some high-priced talent. Offensively, you have to build an incredibly good offense to be able to not just put up great numbers, in that gauntlet of a division where you got the Dodgers, you got the Padres, you've got the Giants. I mean, it's endless. The Diamondbacks I probably should bring up as well. So if Colorado tries to build that great offense again, like they used to have, you got to have some multiple-time All-Stars and maybe even some MVP caliber players. Not saying Jordan Beck would be one of those guys, but he maybe is step one in having a good offensive bat that can produce at Coors Field, which is easier to do than any other ballpark, but also have good numbers on the road. They need a bunch of guys like Jordan Beck. So I would say it's unlikely they try to move him unless the Royals really made it seem enticing and sending them a couple of prospects or even some big league players already that would lengthen out their rotation and lengthen out their lineup. Next one is going to be coming from Bryce. Which of the Royals starters moved to the pen? If they keep him, I think it should be Bubic. He had success there in 2024. Kris Bubic is such an interesting case when it comes to keeping him in the rotation or moving him back to the bullpen. My initial response, my answer would be I'd keep him in the rotation, because what we saw from Kris Bubic in 2025 really shattered all of our expectations. Even though his second half of the season was derailed due to the rotator cuff strain, when he was healthy, he was this team's best pitcher. He was this team's best starter and one of the more valuable pitchers in all of baseball. We are so soon to forget that because of how the season ended for him. And I understand this plays into your answer because you want Chris Bubich to be healthy. But when I look at it, the upside, the ceiling for Chris Bubich is in the rotation because the Royals need to determine with this dice roll, if Chris Bubich is healthy and he's healthy all season long, we have another all-star and we have a legitimate number 2 in that rotation who can pick up the slack, maybe left by Seth Lugo or Michael Wacha. You also have the upside of, I feel really confident that he can be healthy all year long in the bullpen, but he's a 1 to 2 inning guy. So a 7th to 8th inning guy, if the Royals had a really, really bad bullpen, I would consider it a little bit more. But the Royals do have a much better bullpen. And I feel they could just acquire another left-handed reliever than moving Bubich back into that spot. Pitchers do get hurt. Some pitchers are injury prone, and Chris Bubich might be one of those guys. He had Tommy John, then the rotator cuff strain. Maybe it's something you evaluate in spring training. Keep him stretched out, but maybe you just see how he feels in spring training, if he can be that starter for you, because if he's healthy next year, he will be an all-star again, and he'll be one of the more valuable starters in all of baseball. That's just one man's opinion, though. Lastly, this one's coming from Robert. This one's coming from Jared. Do you think that the World Baseball Classic will affect some of our big players like Vinny, Bobby, or Salvi? I can see it both affecting them positively and negatively because of the possibility of them missing spring training. I love the World Baseball Classic. It's one of my favorite events to watch, period. And that includes NFL, college basketball, college football. I cannot get enough of the World Baseball Classic. It's on my bucket list to be able to go to a park, whether it be Miami or San Diego, where it's been before, or it be out of the country, where you get to go to the Tokyo Dome, or you get to go to the Dominican Republic, where they just bounce around. It's so awesome to see, and it's so great for the sport because these players are so passionate about playing for their country. With those guys, I don't believe it's going to affect them. Last couple of years or last couple of WBCs, you had MJ Melendez out there. You had a young Bobby Witt Jr. that had not popped yet at the big league level. Nelson Velasquez was playing out there. Carlos Hernandez was. Those 3 guys, I'm not too worried about them. I don't need to see much out of them from spring training anyway. I believe it's great for them to go and represent their country. Vinny Pasquantino being the starting first baseman for Team Italy. Bobby Witt Jr. absolutely is going to be the starting shortstop for Team USA, which is just incredible to think about. That's how good he's become with how many great shortstops there are in the bigs. To be the guy starting for Team USA, it's a tremendous honor. And Salvador Perez representing Team Venezuela. He's at this stage in his career where he could take the entire spring training off, and I'm not sure it'd affect him too much there. So it's more so the younger guys I'd be worried about. If you had, Michael Garcia going and playing for Team Venezuela, I would probably want to see more consistent years before that, because we also saw with the Venezuelan Winter League that J.J. Picola in the front office said, we don't want him doing that in the offseason again, where the numbers were great, but it just didn't translate to the big league level. So maybe having those off seasons completely off. I know the WBC is during spring training time. You'd be concerned more about guys who maybe had only done it once at the big league level or had never done it before. You could be more concerned on how it can affect them without a full spring training. But for those guys, the stars of your team, I'm not worried about it too much. Very good question, though. That'll do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every day. For your second, find the all-night Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll be off this weekend, back on Monday with more off-season talk. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.